Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about an 80s trio that their name would suggest that they're a duo. That's right, I'm talking about Thompson Twins. Thompson Twins had hits in the mid-80s and they were all over MTV. They played Live Aid. Everybody loved Thompson Twins, but then they kind of disappeared, and they probably put out a lot more albums than you realize. Well, I'm going to start this episode out like I usually do by telling you how I got into them, and that's going through the import bins up in LA. This is probably about 81, and I see this album by a band called Thompson Twins, and it's called A Product Of, and it was mispriced to like $4.99 instead of the normal import $8.99 prices, so I grabbed it. And I took it home, and it was very odd. It was a very post-punk, very rhythmic, heavily influenced by Eastern music, Western music, lots of world music in there. But it was also kind of a really poppy, melodic, catchy album as well. And at that point, they were like a 4 or 5 piece band. I mean, it was a real band: guitar, bass, drums, etc. Tom Bailey up front, lead vocals. I mean, I wasn't totally 100% blown away by them, but then like a year later, I hear the song on KROQ called "In the Name of Love," but it was very synth dominant, very keyboard heavy. And at that point, once they announced who it was, I thought, holy crap, this is the same band, Thompson Twins. So let's go back to that first album that I bought, and then we'll go through their entire career. That first album is called A Product Of, came out in 1981. As I said, very rhythmic, very post-punk, nothing like they would later become. You can hear the seeds of the later Thompson Twins in that band, but like I said, it was more of a rock band, closer to like a Rip Riggin' Panic, or, one of those bands that sort of added a lot of different world music elements into their music. But Rip Riggin' Panic, I think, was a lot more experimental and sort of out there than Thompson Twins were. Then their second album came out in 1982, and that was called Set. Now, Set had a song on it called In the Name of Love, and that became a hit. And what they did in America is they took most of the album Set, they took a couple songs off of A Product Of, and I believe they remixed some or all of it, and they released it as the album In the Name of Love. Now, I've told you about those albums. Now I'm going to show it to you. Product Of and Set are part of a 2 CD set here. And this contains the albums plus bonus tracks. And you'll see all those tracks there. So if you want the early, more rhythmic, in fact, I think by the time Set came out, they were maybe up to like 6 or 7 members, which included Joe Leeway and Alana Curry and Tom Bailey. They were 3 of the members. And this CD, like I said, contains those first 2 albums. Then I mentioned that In the Name of Love was the remix album. This is that remix album. Because those first 2 albums were not released in the U.S. This was their first U.S. release. Like I said, it was essentially songs off of Set plus a couple other tracks. And it was a lot more keyboard heavy. They were going in that direction. By the time their next album came out, it was called Quick Step and Sidekick. And this is the album that really laid down the Thompson Twins sound. This has Lies. This has Love on Your Side. This has If You Were Here, which was featured in the movie 16 Candles, nice sort of moody ballad type thing. And lots of great songs on this. This is the 2 CD version featuring loads of remixes and B-sides. And it's really a great collection of songs. This definitely laid the foundation for what the Thompson Twins were going to be doing moving forward. It all started with In the Name of Love compilation album, and it moved on to this. Now, when this album came out in the U.S., it was just called Sidekicks. And Sidekicks has been released on CD before, including a version on Superfecta Records. Now, this is essentially the album Sidekicks, with a couple bonus tracks, but they did call it Quick Step and Sidekick. And the interesting thing about this, at least for me, is this 2004 remix had liner notes penned by me. Right there. I wrote those liner notes in 2004 when that reissue came out. But the one I showed you before was on Edsel, and that's the one that has more bonus tracks. I did not write the liner notes for that. 1984 brought their biggest album called Into the Gap. And this, again, is a special expanded 2 CD edition. Loads of bonus tracks on there. And this, of course, features the big hit Hold Me Now, which is probably what they're best known for. But it also has Dr. Doctor, Sisters of Mercy, You Take Me Up. Lots of great songs on here. This is, again, that more synth sound. But the thing that I didn't mention about the previous album, Quick Step and Sidekick, is that world music influence was still there. You were still hearing keyboard riffs that had like melodies, like Eastern music melodies, which added a lot more depth to what they were doing. This continued in that tradition, and this was a huge record. And there you have it. It's the three members of Thompson Twins. That's Tom Bailey, Alana Curry, and Joe Leeway. And the songs are, pop heaven. Now, that was such a big, massive album. How were they going to follow that up? Well, they were going to put out the album called Here's to Future Days. Another great collection of songs. From what I understand, this didn't do as well maybe in like UK and Europe as Into the Gap did. But here in America, they were still getting lots of airplay. Lots of tracks got played on, King for a Day, Lay Your Hands on Me, Don't Mess with Dr. Dream. And this is the expanded edition. Again, loads of non-album tracks, remixes, etc. Now, unfortunately, Joe Leeway left the band, and the Thompson Twins, which was a trio, now became a duo, which you can technically say is kind of like being twins, right? So technically, they were the Thompson Twins. Now, the first thing that they put out as a duo, they did the theme song to the movie Nothing in Common, which was Tom Hanks and Jackie Gleason. And that was released only on the soundtrack. The next thing they released was the album Close to the Bone. This came out in 1987. This was produced by Rupert Hine, and this album did not sell well at all. And this kind of was the death knell for them. I think that people weren't used to just seeing two twins, even though they probably complained, well, there's three, twins means two. Now there's two. They're going, well, there's not three twins. But yeah, this is a very, very fine album. I love Rupert Hines' production. It's not as great or as strong as the previous albums. I don't know how much input Joe Leeway had into everything, but this is a fine album. There is no expanded edition of this, but this was kind of like their last album as that new wave band that we all became familiar with. Tom and Alana moved to New Zealand, and they were sort of restarting their lives together. And this album came out. This was on Warner Brothers, and it is called Big Trash. And this came out in '89. And instead of sticking to what came before, that early '80s synth pop sound, they were sort of embracing what was to come, such as the Manchester baggy beat. They were concentrating more on like dance beats. I don't want to say this is getting close to techno or house music because that would come later, but this was kind of like the bridge in between the Thompson Twins of old and what was to come. And it's a fine album. This does have some nice songs on it. I don't think it's as strong because they were writing for a different audience. It seemed like they were writing more for a dancing crowd, moving away from that, moving away from pop. They were in a different environment, a whole different headspace, and that makes total sense. It's really difficult to blame a band for wanting to move forward and change, because if they didn't do that, then people would complain that they weren't moving forward and changing, which is always the frustrating thing about being in a group. Their next album came out in 1991, and it was called Queer. And this was the last album as Thompson Twins. This is moving even closer to that sort of house, baggy Manchester sound. And there are some fine songs on the album, but again, moving away from Thompson Twins. I think, in a sense, this album should have been released under a different band name, because it was a pretty radical change, even more so than Big Trash. But they must have watched this video in the future and then went back in time, because they continued, but they changed the name of the band as they explored more of, the dance scene. And the songwriting was different, but it was very much coming from the same people that put those Thompson Twins albums together earlier. The first album as Babble, that's Tom and Alana. They changed the name from Thompson Twins to Babble. And The Stone came out in 1993. This is their first album under that new band name. As I said, more dancey, trippy, psychedelic house type thing. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a female vocalist on many of the songs on this and the next album. And I'm assuming it's Alana, because it doesn't list any guest vocalists. And, I've tried to do some research and see if who it is singing, and I assume it's Alana. And I'm thinking, well, how come she didn't handle a lot of vocals in the early days? Well, maybe she wasn't comfortable with it, or maybe it's not her. I don't know. But this came out in 1993. It was followed 2 years later by the album Ether, another Alana Curry and Tom Bailey album. Again, it does have some elements of Thompson Twins, but this is mostly kind of trippy psych house. Not like real techno-y or anything like that. More like something to smoke pot to and stand on the dance floor and sway. This was the last album that they recorded together. I believe that they divorced and eventually they both moved back to the UK, started separate lives. Tom Bailey went off and worked with a couple different world music and maybe instrumental or experimental bands or whatever. He didn't return to the pop world until 2018 with a solo album called Science Fiction. Now, this is the limited edition 2 CD version. It contains science fiction and science fantasy, which is a CD of remixes and such. It also contains a Tom Bailey autograph there. And this is a return to that same kind of songwriting that Thompson Twins did. Very poppy, very straightforward, sounds wonderful. It's definitely modern technology. He's not trying to recreate Thompson Twins, but since he's writing pop music again, you can't help but compare it to the Thompson Twins of old. And this is like a modern Thompson Twins album. He does not tour as the Thompson Twins. I believe he tours as Thompson Twins Tom Bailey or Tom Bailey's Thompson Twins. But he has been playing live and doing some tours. But that's Tom Bailey. Science Fiction came out in 2018. But that's the last we've heard of any members of the Thompson Twins as far as I know. There are many different Thompson Twins compilations out there. I recommend something like this, which is called The Greatest Hits. And this has Nothing in Common, the 7-inch version, which is not on any album. Plus it has 7-inch mixes of certain songs. So you're going to be able to find this. Maybe most of these 7-inch versions are the bonus tracks on the other discs. I didn't really compare them. I really just bought this so I can have Nothing in Common. And this pretty much focuses on the hit period from In the Name of Love up to Close to the Bone. It's definitely worth your while. But like I said, there's many different hits compilations that you can pick up by them. Another one that I really like is this one here, which is Remixes and Rarities, which is a 2 CD set, and it contains a bunch of remixes and rarities. And of course, probably all these songs are on the Edsel 2 CD sets. But, when you're a collector, you're a collector. Anyway, guess what? I have a medley. It is a 5-minute medley featuring just little segments of songs from each of the albums. It starts in 1981, ends in 2018, and you get lots of great music in between, including their hits. So sit back, relax, and I will see you on the other side.
higher. Right from the start, she'll break your heart. This girl's on fire. Changing towards your rain. You don't have to stand in the pouring rain. Changing, you're so strange. Won't you come out and play with me again? You take me to a higher place. You take me to another space. You take me to a higher ground. You take me up and then you bring me down. You take me away.
Love has no name. Yeah, love has no shame. Love has no name. Love has no shame.
If you need someone to take you on, loosen your blindfold. If you need someone to take you in, a shelter from the cold. What kind of world you think we'll find? What kind of memories we left behind?
Anyway, thank you very much for allowing me to talk about Thompson Twins and their catalog and play you the medley. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments below what you think about Thompson Twins. And remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.